Welcome to the Futurisity Podcast. This is the conversation with Dominik Hackl, game developer, web developer, pianist, and founder of the Magic Keys. Magic Keys is a mixed reality piano learning application that aims to help you to learn piano in a fun and intuitive way with the help of combining physical and digital worlds together. We'll speak about it later on. And in the first line, thanks for finding some time, Dominik. I'm really glad to see you on the Futurisity Podcast. Why wouldn't you briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So as you already said in your introduction, I'm a game developer, recently focusing a lot on virtual reality and augmented reality. And I'm also a pianist, a passionate one, as a hobby. In my current project, I can luckily combine or try to combine these two passions of mine. I'm currently developing an app called Magic Keys, which, as you said, is a mixed reality piano learning app, which means that you as the user are basically wearing the VR headset, sitting at your piano, and you watch through the VR headset and see the notes augmented directly on top of your piano keyboard. So think about Guitar Hero directly on the piano. So the goal is basically to give users an easy and accessible way and a fun way, especially to piano learning. That's what my mission is basically. And I'm really happy to be able to do this full time as of end of last year. And that's what my current focus is.
That's great. I mean, it's awesome. How did you start with the piano?
I guess my family is quite musically, I would say, but I think I started playing the piano, or play a keyboard when I was 7 or 8, maybe. We basically had quite an old keyboard somewhere lying around, and I picked it up and always messed around a little bit with it. And here in Austria, where I live, we have quite a good music school system where it's basically really affordable to register your kids for music schools, and it's really widespread, and basically anybody can afford it. So it's a lot of people, a lot of parents just register their kids when they're young for some instrument which they would like their kids to play, I guess. And for me, there was the piano. So after like 1 or 2 years of private lessons on the keyboard, I got a position at my local music school for piano. And so I was really lucky to have piano lessons from that on, which I had until I started at university, I think, which was like when I was 19, I guess. So I had like 10, 11, 12 years of music school lessons, which were incredibly valuable when I think about it now. And I guess my biggest advantage was that I kept playing when I got into my teens, 14 or something, which I know a lot of people who quit playing at that age, sadly, and then only until much later want to pick it up again. So I think I was really lucky that I somehow was motivated enough to keep playing at that age, which was, I guess, when I effectively learned the most, I guess.
That's what happened to me, basically. Because since I moved from my hometown, from Belarus, I quit playing piano because I don't have piano in here, and it's kind of expensive luxury part to buy. So if I have an opportunity in the dorm where I lived, I've tried to play piano. But as you've said, it's a little bit sad.
But it's just a very fulfilling activity, I think. And so a lot of people at some age try to put pick it up again, which is awesome. And that's probably also part of my mission to give people an even easier way. I mean, it's already easy now with the internet and like resources on YouTube and so on, so you don't necessarily need an expensive teacher or anything, and there are also affordable electric instruments and so on. So it is accessible, I guess, but it could even be more accessible, in my opinion.
You know what? I was pretty curious. Do you have some kind of influence from Austrian componist vibes from back in the days? Because I've been to Austria many times. My uncle lives in there. I think there is like this kind of special vibe of piano music on the streets. It was like 2020 in Salzburg.
Yeah.
And there was so many pianists out in the streets, really like
Uh-huh.
with a random royal, and it's
Yeah.
insane. Do you have that kind of influence?
I don't know. It's really hard to say. So living here, so I don't live in a city where there is like a very strong musical influence like Vienna or Salzburg. I'm aware that there are a lot of street artists and also like a lot of this kind of 17th century cosplay type of royal court stuff, especially in Vienna and Salzburg, which kind of wanna promote the Mozart and so on stuff. But I don't know if I could say I have influence from that, but like even in my smaller city and so on, there are a lot of classical concerts, and it's very easy to listen to world-class orchestras if you like Salzburg or Vienna, especially obviously, but also in smaller places there's a lot of offer in terms of live performances of classical music, so that's definitely a big thing. And as I said, I think the music school system is very much widespread, so I feel that a lot of people here are playing some instrument, especially like brass bands and so on. Wind bands are also extremely common here. And so I think that would be part of the influence, that there is just a lot of playing music in general. But I wouldn't say so much this kind of vibe and maybe stereotype of Austria in terms of Mozart and so on. Personally, I much preferred the Russian composers
they're great as well.
Piano music. So I'm a huge fan of Rachmaninoff and Tchaikovsky and so on.
Oh yeah,
not so much of Mozart actually.
To be honest, like in my eyes, all the times that I've been to Austria, I've seen that kind of huge governmental support for this piano culture, and that's really highly valuable, because it's not something that you wait in every country where there were born like a lot of companies, great companies.
Yeah, that's extremely valuable. Yeah, especially for, like I said, parents who are maybe not that wealthy that they can afford to give like expensive private lessons to all of their kids, but here it's really affordable and cheap. So and that's because it's obviously sponsored by the government.
Yeah, great. I'm really curious about, and I ask this question like in every single interview: what makes you wake up every day in the morning?
Yeah, I mean, one part is, I guess, playing the piano, but in general, I would say I love to build stuff, to create stuff. I had this since I was a child. I think I have a lot of creativity, which I want to channel into building stuff that lasts, that I can look back in 10 years and see what I made. I don't know. I like to be productive. It doesn't mean I'm kind of workaholic or something, but I just really love to spend my time building stuff that lasts or that has some kind of impact, I guess. So it's really easy to me if I have some project in my head, some passion project which I can think about all the time, then I'm happy generally and I have motivation to get up, and even if I'm doing something else, if I'm hanging out with my friends or doing sports and so on, it's really motivating for me to have this passion project in my head which drives me forward, I guess.
Do you think it's a general purpose of living to wake up with a purpose, that there should be meaning for life, something beyond your existence and beyond your just normal day-to-day activities? And it shouldn't be like, I don't know, you shouldn't build the rocket company or whatsoever.
I think so. I definitely find it easier to wake up in the morning having some kind of purpose, like you said. I mean, this doesn't have to be like I mentioned to build some stuff, but it could also be, I don't know, different purposes. Obviously, family, if you have like children and so on. Sure. This is probably a very strong motivation to get up.
It's a very strong motivation. A lot of people, to be honest, like in our ages, underestimate this, but in my eyes, it's a very strong purpose and it's a very strong some kind of source of motivation to wake up and do something for this, to
Yeah.
invest your time, to invest your energy, to invest your passion, everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't imagine like having or losing this strong sense of purpose. I'm lucky that I think I never had it that strongly so far. So, but I guess it's probably one of the biggest sources of unhappiness and maybe depression of people nowadays, that they maybe lack this kind of sense of purpose. I guess I tend to gravitate towards this kind of building and craftsman mindset, which I think was a little bit stronger in the past, probably when more people were building things and doing things with their hands, or I don't know, working on some skills and so on. And I feel that is one area where maybe society as a whole kind of lost it a little bit on that front. So that's one of my theories, at least, why mental health degraded a little bit over the last years. But obviously, that's just one point of view. There are much more factors.
Yeah, totally. There are a lot of factors that influence, like that decrease in happiness, in general happiness of a society and of the humanity, and definitely that kind of lack of purpose or lack of responsibility to take something and keep it pushing. That's definitely one of them, and not the last one, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's move to another topic, the most interesting one. In the following, I would like to discuss mixed reality with you, augmented reality. So, in one sentence, mixed reality is a merging of real and virtual worlds to produce new environments where digital and real objects coexist and interact real time with each other, or close to real time. And as we approach the next normal in culture, business, entertainment, or whatsoever, mixed reality is emerging as a powerful technology that can enhance and digitally transform the services and support that companies of all types provide. So probably everyone listening to this podcast has already heard about some kind of virtual reality terms, augmented reality, extended reality, mixed reality, and so on and so on and so on. So what is the difference between them? What is the difference between virtual reality, mixed reality, augmented reality, and extended reality?
It's honestly a little confusing, because these terms are kind of interchangeable to some degree, I feel. But I mean, there is this kind of famous, at least in the area of VR, AR, it's called the reality virtuality continuum, which I think was developed by Paul Milgram back in the very early days of virtual reality and so on. And it's this scale where on the one side there is the complete real environment, so where we live in without any technology, and on the other end of the spectrum there is the virtual reality, which is the complete virtual reality without any real stuff. And basically everything in between is really a fluid spectrum, and I guess everything in between is called mixed reality, where there are some aspects of the real world and some aspects of the virtual world. And virtual reality is obvious. That's on the far end of the virtual spectrum, where you're basically completely immersed in the virtual world. I would say computer games, video games are also in that area, even if traditionally you've played them on a screen which is in the real world, but inside of the game it's a completely virtual environment. So I would say video games are kind of a virtual reality. And augmented reality is kind of a little bit before the real world, but not quite there. So it has elements of the virtual world. So it's basically the reality overlaid with some virtual content. And I guess on the spectrum there's also augmented virtuality, which is I guess in theory would be something like a virtual reality where you have some real content, which could mean something like you have maybe real world controllers which you use to control the VR, or maybe some tangible user interface stuff or stuff like that, I guess. But really it's a continuum. So mixed reality I actually like best of all the terms, because it encompasses most of the stuff in between, which I think we'll see more and more. extended reality is, I'm actually not that sure. I think it's an overall term which encompasses the entire spectrum. And it's often used, as a general term for all realities, basically, which are coming up. So I hope that's a little bit right. But I would definitely say that mixed reality is what we'll see most, probably, because more and more apps have some point on the spectrum.
Okay. I'm not a professional in this sphere, and I've never had some kind of expertise in this field of VR, AR. But as I've imagined, and exactly that's what you've said, there is a spectrum from computer games to VR headsets to put yourself into complete another world. There is a lot of states, and it's like fluid, and that's interchanging, and it's changing also with the time and with the new technologies and with the new breakthroughs in the technologies, I guess. The kind of interesting thing, right? To see how the humanity and how the society like moved from just typical human world to this spectrum. Also, mobile phones is like a part of everyday life.
I guess it's already some kind of augmented reality to use mobile phones. You could say that's already virtual objects in the real world, to some degree at least. So it's definitely interesting how we move there. And I don't know, I think many people didn't anticipate that we as a society go in that direction, at least not like 10 years from now, or even 20. Even when there were computers and all mobile phones, it was still not entirely clear that we go into this direction of virtual reality, I think, and augmented reality, even though it has been around since the 80s, I guess, but obviously only in theory and in research and so on. So there has been augmented reality in the 80s, but these were like huge devices, and it's bears little to no resemblance to what it is now. But it's interesting if that's the path we take as a society, and if it's an inevitable path, maybe even to go as a species as a whole into a more virtual direction, virtual environment and world. For me personally, I don't usually ask myself these big questions in terms of VR, AR. I now currently tend to focus a little bit more on what's possible now with the technology we have, and what's the in what ways we can benefit from it, what we can do now, and what cool use cases we can do now, basically.
Totally. But that's kind of thing that when I've started with the data science back in the days, I tried to remind myself all the time that you have to keep in mind that kind of bigger picture. And it's also like one of the reasons why I've started this podcast, just to get the opinion of the people from the different industries, like where are we moving? What's the direction of a society as itself? Because as we see, the world is super fragile. Like it can break down like within 2 days. And that's kind of a very interesting question that I think we should keep in mind in terms of making decisions on a daily basis. Also, in some sort of way, it's difficult. It's very difficult. I do basically the same. I'm trying to understand what it's possible with the technologies right now and how we can profit from it. How can I create something? But to have it in the back of your head, it's not a good thing, I guess.
I definitely feel responsible as an engineer working in this field for what we are doing, basically, because who else would be? I mean, it has been the case several times in near history that the engineers that built the products were basically responsible a lot for how society evolved. Like you can see with probably Facebook and the social media sites and so on. I mean, nobody cared at first what these developers were hacking around in their rooms, but they actually triggered a huge social, I don't know, change and evolution, and so it there is a lot of responsibility if you are able to create these things with new technology. So I definitely feel that we should be responsible as engineers also. But on the other hand, if you are working closely with the technology, you also know the limits of it, and I feel currently the limits are probably higher than a lot of people recognize, especially now with the metaverse hype and so on. A lot of people are, I think, fearing what potentially will come with this technology. And now that it's mainstream, a lot more people are talking about it, and many people that are not that well informed may have very pessimistic views about what we may or may not be able to do within years or something. But I would say that the state of technology is a pretty hard limit still, and we are nowhere near smart contact lenses which are perfectly capable of augmented reality and so on. I mean, these things take time. So I think it's not that urgent to worry about these huge grand questions, but it's definitely valuable to do it early on, but it's not that urgent than that some might think, I think.
We have a saying, apple a day keeps a doctor away. So it's better to a bit too early rather than like 1 second too late. Talking about limitation and limits and all these challenges, what are the biggest limitations of mixed reality or augmented reality in general, extended reality for the everyday usage? What are the greatest challenges that you see?
Yeah, you mean with the current state of hardware and so on?
Exactly. Yes.
I would say virtual and augmented reality have very different challenges. Let's start maybe with virtual reality. There we have like the famous challenge of motion sickness, which I think many people have experienced that have tried VR headsets, which is basically when you are basically moving in VR, but you're obviously not moving physically. So your brain gets kind of confused and it feels really weird. I would say it feels a little bit like maybe feeling sick in the backseat of a car. I think I would compare it mostly to that feeling. And yeah, I would say it's a design problem. So game designers, app designers of VR content should have this in mind when designing their experiences. And obviously, a lot of people react differently. Some have no problem with that at all. Others cannot even try the mildest experiences without feeling motion sick. I personally, I have tried a few rather intense VR games, and I would consider myself I'm not that easily motion sick.
So you're not too sensitive to the.
I'm not too sensitive to motion sickness, but there's the VR game Half-Life Alyx, which is one of the biggest, one of the poster child VR games out there currently, and it's actually a perfect game on many levels. You could consider it's really well made and it's really fun to play, but I cannot get myself to play for longer than 20 minutes. Not really because I'm getting motion sick, but because it's such an intense experience. You're like physically you're so immersed in that world, and it's not only physically exhausting, but it's also emotionally exhausting, I feel. And as I said, I'm not that sensitive. I didn't have this feeling at all when playing other video games on a screen, but this is an entirely different thing for me. And I feel maybe we should probably move a little bit to like lighter experiences, and not like maybe not first person shooters, but some little more relaxed genres. So I was really fascinated when I experienced it first, because I thought, hey, I mean, the more immersed the better, the more intense the better. But now I have a little bit of a different feeling on that regard. So that's probably in VR the most common limitation, and aside from other things like movement and so on. So obviously it's a little hard to move in VR. you can move with the controllers, but then you have a strong sense of or potential of motion sickness, and it doesn't feel that natural. So there are experimental things like these treadmills, which are pretty awesome. I think I haven't tried one, but I'm sure they're really cool. But obviously they require a lot of hardware and setup. So maybe something else will be figured out on that regard.
And from the technological perspective,
I guess, nowadays with headsets like the Oculus Quest, which are standalone headsets, which was a pretty big step forward, because previously you had to use tracking boxes, which you had to set up
on
in
the
your
corners
room,
of the room.
basically. Yeah, and you also had to connect it via cables to your PC. And now the Oculus Quest is basically the first, or at least the first major standalone headset. But obviously, it has the downside that all the processing power and graphics hardware is also in the headset. So it uses mobile hardware similar to what in your smartphone. So there you have a lot of performance limitations, of course. But I guess we can count on technology to evolve there, and probably in a few years we will be able to do much more advanced stuff there as well. But that's definitely something to consider. So if you want to do photorealistic graphics in your VR experience, then it's still you still have to go for PC VR essentially. So your PC renders all the graphics, and then only the display output is transferred to your headset, basically.
What about augmented reality?
Yeah, there we have, I would say, in augmented reality in general, a lot less has been figured out yet, because there haven't really been a lot of good headsets which are purely AR headsets. So the Oculus Quest, which I just mentioned, is a virtual reality headset. But recently they've added this mode where you can use the cameras to see through, basically. So you have the VR headset on your head, but you are seeing what the cameras see, basically. And this enables you also to have augmented reality. But this is in stark contrast to true AR headsets, which are actually or should be transparent displays, basically, which rely on an entirely different technology. For instance, there's the Microsoft HoloLens, which was one of the earliest who did this, and still is. And other than that, there's only the Magic Leap, which both of those didn't really take off in the consumer area. They're both went into the enterprise direction, and both are really expensive, like over 2,000 euros. So and they also have the probably the biggest problem with those headsets compared to VR is the field of view, which is basically what you're seeing of the virtual content when you're wearing the headset. So when you're wearing those headsets, you basically see through the display because it's a transparent display, but there is only a small frame of that portion where you can overlay virtual content, which is kind of underwhelming when you are wearing it your first time, because in the videos and so on, it looks like all of your field of vision is like there's virtual content all over the place, but when you're wearing it, there's really only a narrow field of view on that. We are getting better there, and it's also only a matter of time probably, but that's currently one of the biggest limitations to consider. And I gotta say, that's one of the major reasons I moved with Magic Keys, with my app. I moved to the Oculus Quest with the camera see-through mode. Before, I developed it on both the HoloLens and then the Magic Leap. But with both these headsets, there was this huge problem of the field of view, especially in my case, since I want the notes to be moving from a distance towards your piano keyboard. There it was a huge issue if they were cut off, because then you couldn't really prepare for it. And so that problem went kind of away with the Oculus Quest. And the reason why virtual reality headsets have a bigger field of view is that it's just a completely different display technology, and it's much easier there to provide a big field of view.
Mm-hmm. Well,
other than that, maybe I should mention one other thing is outdoor, which is there was currently in the news because HoloLens, which is made by Microsoft, they had a huge contract with the US Army, with the military, who are quite interested in augmented reality for several reasons. And I think they just dropped, or the contract is about to drop because they didn't figure out how to use it outdoors, which obviously is a huge deal for the army. And yeah, so these devices are basically relying on a lot of sensors and cameras, and obviously in outdoors when there's a lot of sunlight and bright light, or maybe lack of sunlight or other weather conditions, these systems just don't work really well yet. So that's definitely a limitation, which because a lot of AR use cases, I would imagine, will be outdoor use cases, like walking around in the streets and maybe having some information overlaid on restaurants or shops or products or people, I don't know. But that's just not possible yet with the current state of technology. So that's a big thing to consider when making apps or thinking about app use cases.
I guess it's a long way as well to get really to the fully autonomous headsets that can exist without any wires, without any sensors in the corner of your rooms. For example, with the army case, it's also some kind of what happens if there's any dust out there.
Exactly. That's why they really have to rely on the transparent display technology and not on the VR, because the VR can always fail, like power out or anything, and then you have a black screen in front of your head, which is insanely dangerous. So they have to have a lot of fail-safe mechanisms and stuff like that.
All right. Talking about mixed reality, could you decompose the process of the mixed reality app development from scratch to final app? Like, because I've never done it, and I guess like 99% of all the listeners never done it. But maybe just simple decompose from the idea on a piece of paper to the final app. Like, what are the major steps you have to do in order to succeed?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in my case, if you are
for example, on the case of the magic keys.
Yeah, I'll try to remember because first of all, I initially developed the first prototype of magic keys like 4 years ago already. Back then as part of a university project, but back then it was it ran on a tablet. So it's basically a lot messier than planning the thing first and then conceptualizing it and then implementing it. Sadly, it was not that case at all. I think it was much more of an iterative process where I developed a prototype very quickly and then iterated on top of that a lot of times. Like I developed the app at this point on, I think, 5 different platforms and devices. And luckily, the one thing that's always that has always been the solid foundation is the game engine, because all of this stuff in most of the 3D applications, so these are games and all other kinds of 3D environments, you basically rely on a game engine, which in my case is Unity. The other famous one currently is Unreal Engine. So these are 2 general purpose game engines which take care of all of the rendering, all of the 3D scene stuff, and a lot more things which are handy basically, so you don't have to do everything from scratch. But the cool thing about those engines is that they work very well in a cross-platform way. So I didn't have to scrap the app every time I ported it to a new platform.
Oh, really?
So that was definitely a huge thing. Yeah. Even back then when I did it for Android tablet, it was the same. There's still some legacy code from that time So I still, I could basically move it to a different platform, adjust several things, adjust hardware specific things, controller stuff and so on. But the core piano logic and rendering and stuff like that remained kind of the same, or at least parts of it. But back to your question, I try to remember how I actually did it. I mean, I can't really remember doing a paper prototype first, but I definitely started doing a little more planning when I moved on. And so basically my first prototype was a really rough version where you had a piano keyboard, or at least the app tried to generate the piano keyboard on top of your real one, so that it knows where the keys are basically. And then all it did was take some input file, which was a MIDI file, which is a file format that has the information about the musical notes in a piece. And it just took this MIDI data and played it back and highlighted the keys at the moment they were supposed to be played. So it was just like watching an automatic player piano or something like that. So it had not much use, because I mean, you couldn't anticipate the notes. They were just highlighted as soon as you were supposed to play them. So that was the really first draft. And then I ported it over to the HoloLens, which I had access to via my university, luckily, since I said these devices were quite expensive. But there it was already quite obvious that the idea had potential, but the approach wasn't the right one to just highlight the notes. So I thought about different ways to do it. Obviously, then I had the idea of using a similar approach than the rhythm games, Guitar Hero, Rock Band, and so on, or of course these YouTube videos with the falling notes, which are very prominent now. But as I said before, the field of view was the huge problem there. So I couldn't really do it in a way I wanted to. But those were, like I said, the iterations. So I tried different approaches. I tried something where the notes appeared on the key, but had a little bit of a build up, so you could anticipate what's coming next. And I tried a lot of things with color and other stuff which you can use in 3D basically. And yeah, so slowly I settled on what the current state is basically. And nowadays, when I'm trying to add features, I definitely do a lot more planning, try to sketch it out on paper, try to research a little bit about maybe what other apps. I mean, there are not a lot of apps I can look up, but there are maybe apps like Beat Saber, a prominent VR rhythm game where I can take inspiration from, or other conventional piano learning sources, stuff like that. So I really try to do a lot more planning nowadays. And yeah, next after planning, I move over to the game engine, Unity in my case. Do mostly a little bit of stuff in the 3D scene, like setting up how the key objects look like, setting up effects, particle effects, sound effects, stuff like that. And then usually it's quite most of the process is coding. Then
which language? Which language do you use?
C#.
C#
is the language that Unity is powered by. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's quite handy because it is a language that's really common across other fields as well. So I can make use of, for instance, common libraries, which are really easy to integrate into Unity. Like, for instance, a MIDI reading library or something like that. And I guess the last part, which would be also incredibly important in VR AR, would be user testing. So to give it to several different people and get feedback from them, because obviously it's a lot harder to design user experience than with conventional technology like mobile apps and so on. There's a lot more resources and experience already there in VR and especially AR. there are not many things you can look up to. There are not many experiences made already, so you basically have to figure out a lot of these things on your own and test with people how they react to it and how well it works, basically.
Understand that's one of the bigger things, to have real people that give you like real valuable feedback.
It is, especially when you're biased by testing or playing around with the app for 4 years already.
Exactly.
So it's really it's it's hard to underestimate the impact of that. So I always tend to think it's obvious how to use this particular feature or anything like that, but yeah.
I'm really curious about one thing, if I can ask, of course. So how does this process works of notes coming to the keyboard? And on the video that I've seen that you've posted on YouTube, and I'll put it in the description to this episode, how this process works, where you see these notes coming, what the mechanics behind it. I still cannot really get 100% like how this transition works, because I can imagine there are some kind of other use cases for that moving objects, but I still cannot figure out how does it work on a, let's say, low technical level.
Okay. So as I said, I'm using a MIDI like format. I've used MIDI directly. Now I'm using a custom format which I've adapted a little bit to my uses, to my needs. But essentially, the MIDI format contains a stream, a list of note events. So it says now at this timestamp there is a C note, C4 or something like that.
So they're based on the timestamps.
Exactly. It is time coded in. It's not really microseconds, but it's some measure related to the tempo of the piece. So it's kind of something like steps, basically related to the tempo. And so that the start of a note is time coded and the duration is also time coded. So you basically get a list of note on and note off events. Okay, that was not quite true. Now I confused my format and the MIDI format. In MIDI, there is actually no duration, but there are note on and note off events. So you only get at times an event when there is a note played, and you get another event when this note is released, basically. Okay. So in my format, I changed this a little bit. So I'm pre-processing it and adding the durations, which it's easy to do, but it makes the process of reading these files much easier. But yeah, that's basically it. That's most of the information that you get. Then there are several other information like tempo changes, volume changes, stuff like that. But other than that, there's basically a list of notes. And then in the app, I'm reading this list of notes and doing real-time playback, where I'm basically comparing it to the current elapsed time at each step, and just reading the incoming notes. And in between, after each frame, I'm moving the notes that are already there one step closer to the keyboard, which is similar to maybe in a game where you're moving a character. So it's just basic movement of a 3D object. And if a note is getting close to this position where you're supposed to hit it, then I'm looking up if the user is holding down the key or not, and then the app is evaluating whether the key was successfully hit or not, basically. Okay. And then doing its thing about it. Crazy. But that's a good enough explanation what you wanted. But that's pretty much it. So a special input format with the notes, and then the app is just in real time processing those notes and moving them along. It's
really mind blowing. I swear, if you will once put it in production, I'll buy it, because
that's awesome.
back in the days, I was playing with my friend's Guitar Hero, like could play really the whole day long, and it was so awesome. Probably we've played like all the versions of Guitar Hero.
expert mode.
Yes, that was hitting
It's
Barracuda on the
yeah,
expert mode. That was kind of fun.
yeah. It's insane how well your muscle memory works, right? I mean, it's if you're looking at those pieces which have insane speed at the first time, you will say, I mean, that's humanly impossible to hit all of those notes. But if you're practicing long enough and know this piece in and out, then it's just flowing and
Exactly.
it's pretty insane. But that's actually the same thing with playing actual real instruments. I mean,
Exactly. And you know what? I've noticed it because when I've started playing the piano back in the days, I don't know, I was 12 or 13 or something with the YouTube videos, or not even with the YouTube videos. There was no like proper YouTube in Belarus in
mhm.
2013. But how insane! I still cannot read notes. I've never done it. Like I've learned some basic on how to read notes, but I will
Yeah.
never be able to do it right now. But muscle memory is such a key that it's insane. I've never thought in my life that you can your fingers or your body can remember so many things. Of course, it's your
Yeah.
brain in the first line, but like you can remember. It's like, I don't know, you've learned once how to ride a bike,
Yeah.
and then you can it. You
Yeah.
cannot unlearn
Exactly.
it. That's amazing, and that's a huge potential use case for this. Like in my eyes, that's crazy. Like, I mean, I'm talking about magic keys.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
exactly. That's one of the things that I hope will apply, because obviously I have gotten a lot of criticism. As I mean, I have in general I've gotten really positive feedback when I posted all of these videos, which a lot of them blew up a lot, and I got a lot of positive feedback. But I also got consistently like criticism, probably a lot of times by more advanced pianists or maybe teachers or something like that, which is a very valid criticism that hey, is this actually a viable learning alternative? Can you actually learn to play the piano with a system like that, or is it maybe even counterproductive to learning? Which I have thought a lot about over the last years. And I mean, it's still I still can't answer it fully, because I just haven't tested it with enough people. But as you said, muscle memory is probably one of the best ways you can answer this, because yeah, if you can learn it that way in your muscle memory, then it shouldn't matter how you learned it. It shouldn't matter if you learned it via traditional sheet music or via a system like mine. So I guess
Exactly.
it can work.
I guess there are two opinions, like two point of views on this question. In the first line, of course, like from more advanced and more experienced pianist teachers, they will say probably it will not work without the notes, like proper notes and understanding like the whole system behind like playing music, how it's created. But there are such curious minds as you and me probably that learn for ourselves. In my
Yeah.
eyes, I will not spend time learning notes just because I want to learn notes. I would like to play piano. It doesn't matter how I learned this, right? And I get there should be a differentiation. Of course, maybe in the closest future, it will not be possible with the magic keys to learn like on the expert level the piano.
No.
Yeah,
Yeah, you just have to know what your target audience is basically, and what you want.
yeah.
So I think my goal is to bring a lot of people to starting to play the piano,
Mhm.
which a system like that is ideal for. I would say, like you said, learning notes, learning sheet music is a very strong barrier of entry,
Yeah.
because it's really hard at first. It doesn't come naturally to learn this cryptic sheet music language, and a lot of it is not necessary to begin to play the piano.
Mhm.
It's even a little counterproductive, because there are a lot of people want to play like pop songs or stuff like that, and there it's much more important to get a sense of chords and how groups of notes essentially form harmonics, and to recognize the patterns, which is something that is not traditionally taught. I think, at least I wasn't taught that at first.
Mhm.
And So there are different ways which doesn't involve first learning all of the symbols and sheet music language. And yeah, as you said, obviously I don't, at least currently or at first, target expert pianists or people who want to pursue an expert career, or even want to, I don't know, play advanced Chopin pieces or something like that. That's probably not my target audience. These are, to be fair, also a very small percentage of people who want to play the piano. Most people just want to start because they maybe like to play some of their favorite song a little bit, or just, I don't know, try something out and have fun a little bit. And I think for them the most dangerous thing is the loss of motivation, which strikes for most people, unfortunately, I think. And this is probably mostly due to this barrier of entry that comes in very early. If you have to read sheet music, or even if you, I don't know, if there's not enough motivation, if you don't have enough progress at first, then it's probably hard to retain motivation. You could of course argue, hey, I mean, that's their problem. People have to learn again to stay motivated and focused for longer periods of time. But I mean, if there is a potential and the technology which enables that in an easier way, then why not do it? So
exactly,
that's really I think that would be my target audience and my niche, which I would focus on first. People who are completely new or really new to the instrument and want to find some way of starting it. And then if they like playing with my app for, I don't know, a few weeks or so, and then decide they want to take teacher lessons and maybe buy a better piano and so on, then I have all of my goals have been fulfilled, and I couldn't be happier. I don't want to keep them all of the time in my app. I would rather have them move on to proper playing, if that's what they want.
Kind of, as I see it, you bring these YouTube learning sessions when you just look on the YouTube video and just to try to imitate like the notes, like the following notes from the videos, to a whole another level. And for the entry, it couldn't be better, really. I mean, that's awesome. And of course, if you are motivated enough and you say, oh, okay, I want to change my tempo and I want to, bring it to another level that Magic Keys cannot give me, why not? That's awesome. I'm gonna buy it. I'm gonna buy it.
Appreciate that. I will let you know as soon as I need testers. Do you have a VR headset? Or
I had an opportunity to get it from my work, but unfortunately, I'm still not a full-time employee.
Yeah.
But as soon as I get an access to them, or I get enough cash saved, probably I will buy it. Not probably, 100% I'll buy it. It's just a matter of time.
I think it's one of the most like value to money, one of the best products that have been released recently, the Quest 2 especially. It's such a cool headset, and they are really developing this headset further. After you've bought it, you get so much more content. Like when I first got it, it didn't have a lot of the features that it has now. So they're bringing these new features and stuff with each update, and this is a really active platform, which is really cool to see, because that hasn't been the case with many other platforms recently. So yeah, I have really much trust in that specific headset in their platform. And one of the coolest things about the Quest is the hand tracking. This is actually really insane how well this already works. They are basically tracking all of the bones in your two hands, in your fingers, in real time. So you get a 3D representation of your hands if you have the headset on. And you can use this to navigate in the menu, and you can use this inside apps. They just recently did a huge update where this got better and better. And I'm actually currently experimenting with a fully virtual keyboard where if you don't happen to have a physical piano or keyboard, you can actually play on top of your desk.
Hey, that's great.
Yeah, it's far from perfect, but it's amazing that technology is already that far that you can actually, just by analyzing your finger positions, you can create a virtual keyboard.
That's what I'm really interested about, is how AI moved from this state where nobody really knew about it to the state like where we see full reconstruction of your bones and of your fingers, and as you've said, it's like 3D. That's crazy.
It's amazing.
That
It's
inspires
amazing
me a lot.
yeah, and the only input source they have is basically the cameras. So there's not even an infrared sensor or anything like that. It's only just 2 camera images.
Computer vision is
exactly.
awesome.
I think that's an area where you know a lot more than me.
Not really. I'm still trying to figure out, but yeah, that's definitely the direction I would like to try, and to figure out how the things works. Right?
Yeah, it's a fascinating area.
All right. You know what? I have a question regarding to metaverse. There's a huge boom in NFTs since last year, since 2 years. And artists are opening direct connections to the fans and creating new revenue streams, selling their songs and albums, covers as NFTs directly to the fans and not over the labels. I'm really fascinated about it, like especially for this use case. And fans are getting involved in the process of masterpiece creation. Communication became much easier, and it seemed that live performances of the artists, for anyone who has proper VR glasses and a stable internet connection, is not so far away from now. So basically, you can attend every big concert of your group or of your band or of your artist, like only having stable internet connection and VR headset.
Yeah.
So the general question would be, how will the metaverse affect the music industry?
I mean, I'm not super involved into the music industry as a whole, because yeah, obviously I would consider myself more in like instrument learning and so on. I didn't have much exposure yet to the music industry. This will probably come if the app happens to be successful, and I may have to set up some stuff to get songs and so on licensed and stuff like that. But I mean, what I can say is that I'm also super excited about the live performance stuff. That's one area I can definitely see the benefits of VR. And maybe there will be or not maybe, I'm sure there will be completely new formats of live performances, like we've already kind of seen a little bit in Fortnite or something like that, where they some famous artists had like cameos or actually full performances, and players watched in some way and interacted in ways that haven't been possible before. And I think a lot more in that direction will come. The question is, how can we make it cooler, or what aspects, what benefits do these virtual live performances have from real ones, other than obviously that you don't have to be there physically. But I think there should be more benefits, like some interactive ways to connect with the artists in real time. Maybe I think we can do a lot in that area. That would be really exciting for me as well. And also what I have to say in that regard is that I'm sure a lot of people, when they would hear something like that, would be afraid that every live performance will move in that direction. But I mean, the fact that we have virtual live performances doesn't at all mean that we shouldn't have real live performances as well. I'm a huge fan of live concerts, and the things that you experience in a live concert you will never be able to replicate, or at least not nowhere near in a virtual reality
100%.
Yeah,
totally agree.
So the physical contacts and the feeling when being in a huge crowd of people, obviously that has a different meaning now after the pandemic, but I think we hopefully will get back to that feeling, and I think it's amazing. It's a completely different experience, but ideally, in my ideal world, both of these things would coexist perfectly without compromising one another.
Mhm.
So
I think
I'm
I think it's also some kind of demand thing, because there will be also, and I really cannot imagine any case where the demand of a society in a live performances, in a physical human live performances, will go away. I can't even imagine a single case, because no virtual reality will replace, as you've said, that kind of feeling of music and vibe as well, because
Yeah.
it's also, it's crowd and people and everything before and after, so that
I agree. And that's a good thing. Yeah. So I think there, yeah, nobody has to be afraid of losing that one if we're going the other direction. But still, I think it would be amazing to see a lot more live performances in that level. But I would like to see new elements to be added there in an interactive layer maybe, and maybe people will start to get a little more inventive what we could do with the new technology, not only just replicating what we have. And another thing which I would be really excited is to have to see, like if we are going to consume more music that way, then I definitely want to see development in the area of sound output. Like I'm a huge fan of classical concerts, and I also listen to a lot of classical music on my speakers, but it's just, you cannot even describe the difference in experience between listening, even if it's the best speakers ever that you can buy. It's nowhere near the experience when you're sitting in a perfect concert hall with an orchestra of 60 plus people. It's you cannot describe the difference. And I would love to see technology move in that way. I don't know. I have no idea about audio engineering to a degree where I can say if we are on the path to that, or if that's even physically possible. But so far, I mean, there hasn't been huge advancements in that area, I feel. So if we have live performances in VR, I also want to have a better audio output. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay. That's kind of really interesting thing. Because I can imagine, like, only when I'll have the VR set one day, probably it will be Oculus 2. It would be so awesome to attend some kind of concert somewhere in the US just by sitting on your couch. That's great. That's great. And I mean, if they would be in my hometown or close to my hometown, no problem. I will definitely choose physical concert instead of a virtual one. But if I don't have an opportunity, that's an awesome possibility to do this and to attend that kind of concert. I think the future, the future of music and the future of concerts will be kind of bright.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
I agree. Yeah, I can't see any other way that it will get worse with technology. I wouldn't know why. Yeah.
What are your best tips for curious minds who want to start a career in augmented reality or in mixed reality or virtual reality development? What are the hard and soft skills that would you recommend?
Definitely, maybe starting with soft skills, you definitely need a lot of you need to be aware that you are building stuff that hasn't been invented yet, or likely to build the future. So you cannot rely on other people's experiences and work. You cannot be afraid of being maybe the first one to work on some problem. And so you probably need quite a bit of determination and endurance when it comes to solving new problems, because maybe on the technical side, I a lot of times I had issues where previously when I worked with more traditional technologies or making traditional games, then there is always a solution somewhere on the internet for common problems. You don't have to look far to find someone else that has encountered this problem. But now with cutting edge APIs and so on the Quest and so on, there are just no resources yet available, because there are not a lot of people probably who are currently developing this very thing. So you have to be aware of that and probably have to figure out more on your own. And I guess a lot of open creativity doesn't hurt, because it's similar to what I just said. Since it hasn't been invented yet, you have to invent a lot of things, and things like what's the best way to interact with a UI in VR and stuff like that. These are open problems basically, so you have to actively contribute to the solution. You cannot rely on pre-made solutions all the time. I think that's one big thing. And hard skills, definitely learn a game engine like Unity or Unreal. I probably would tend a little bit more towards Unity in terms of VR AR, because it's it's a little bit more widespread and it's a little bit more general purpose. Unreal is more targeted towards video games. But that doesn't mean that you cannot do everything with both, basically. But I would definitely, in 99% of cases, use and learn one of those two engines. Both of them are freely available. That's really amazing. That hasn't been the case 10 years ago or 8 years ago. So both of them are freely available, and only if you have make a pretty big amount of money with your product, you have to pay them a few percent of your revenue. So it's a very fair deal, and there's basically no reason nowadays not to use one of those. And there are a lot of tutorials online, a lot of resources to learn them. I guess you could, if you're into games or stuff like that, you can just start by messing around and developing simple games. That's definitely a big that would be a stepping stone into VR AR, because after all, it's the same technology, whether you're making a 3D game or you're making a 3D interactive VR experience. It's the same thing. It's the same technology. A lot of things apply to both areas. So that would probably be my number one tip.
Right. Thank you. And the last question would be, where do you see humanity in 10 or 15 years away from now?
I think one of the reasons I'm pretty optimistic is that I don't know, I've grown up during the internet era, and I had a lot of benefits from having internet access all the time and having access to basically the largest source of information that there ever was in history. I think this will only grow in the future, and especially it will be accessible to more and more people, even people in very remote and poor areas of the world. And this is what I think will contribute a lot to the well-being of humanity, and hopefully also to peace, that a lot of people who are in troubling areas now get access to high-speed internet with projects like Elon Musk's Starlink and stuff like that, and they get this whole new access to. It's basically what we are trying to, when we're trying to build schools in Africa. This is like the same thing, but accelerated to hundreds. At least in theory, obviously, you still need a basic education to be able to learn stuff on the internet on your own. But I think it will accelerate a lot, and it will make it possible for people in those very remote or poor areas to be able to compete or collaborate with everybody else on the planet. That's what I find really optimistic, and hopefully it turns out that way. But I see it in my case. I live on the country, so but I still have high-speed internet. The connection is great, and I can work with everybody I want on the world. I can I have run an international company, and you can hire anybody on the world, can ask anybody on the world for help, and this is just amazing, actually. That's awesome. You think about it.
That's awesome.
So you are awesome. Not at all locked in your location and your place and your circumstances. So I think
In addition to that, maybe the penetration level for the basic knowledge on the internet is way lower right now. Comparing to 20, 30, 40 years ago. Right now, to get the basic education, of course, there should be a lot of valid sources and a lot of verified sources, and not some kind of fake websites where you learn some stuff. But if we're talking from this perspective, that's way easier to learn any kind of technology or any kind of stuff, from architecture to agricultural to the technological thing. We have to appreciate it, right? It's kind of
it's
amazing thing.
We shouldn't take it for granted, because it's not at all. It hasn't been the case like that 20 years ago, I guess. So it's a really good development, I think.
Yeah. All right. On our Futurisity podcast, we also have our special rubric named Blitz. And the idea behind is very simple. I'm going to ask you questions, and you have to answer them without any kind of deep reflection or pondering, right? Try to follow your heart and not your brain. And try to catch the answers that come to your mind the first. All right?
Okay.
If you would write a book till the end of the year, what would it be?
Think about the importance of creativity on the human mind and on mental health.
If you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
To have created a product or a service that has influenced and benefited a lot of people around the world.
What underrated tool or tools are indispensable for your job? That's a tricky one.
I'm already away from the heart and more to brain. I guess my drawing tablet, which I use a lot to sketch out things and edit things.
Okay. And the last one, intelligence or wisdom?
Wisdom.
May I ask why? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think wisdom is like the big picture, and intelligence is what is like the nitty-gritty details. But with enough wisdom, you're probably able to get intelligence or counteract the fact that you're maybe not that intelligent.
Some people say wisdom is intelligence and vice versa.
Yeah,
that's kind of,
you could say it like that. Yeah, I think pure intelligence without any kind of wisdom could lead to trouble, maybe.
Yes.
The other way around, probably also, but I feel more sensible.
It's important to find the balance, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
All right. Thank you very much for your time and your insights into the world of mixed reality, music, your magic keys and metaverse. I wish you really all the best with the magic keys. And as I've said 2 times already, I'm going to buy it once it's on the production level. And I hope to see you again on the Futurisity podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks. It was a great conversation.